Hey, what's up guys? Thanks for stopping by the channel. So for today's video, we're going to be taking a look at another Canadian micro brand called York in Front. And if you're wondering, this naming convention was actually developed by the two owners. They are watch enthusiasts from different cities in Canada. One is in Toronto, where the intersection of York and Front is. And the second owner is actually out west in Vancouver. And the watches we're going to be looking at is actually called the Burrard. And a Burrard is actually a popular street in Vancouver. So you can see how they kind of adopted street names into how they're going to be rolling out their models. And I think that's kind of a nice way to pay tribute to some of the popular locations within Canada. Now I am kind of flexing both of the watches here. So you do have the white Burrard and the black Burrard. And I think they lend themselves slightly differently depending if you want to go more classic and elegant with the white versus if you want to go a little bit more sporty with the black version. And if you are interested in picking up these watches, you can actually buy them direct from the York in Front website, which I'm going to link in the description of this video. Pricing comes in at $4.99 USD, and at that price point, I think there's a lot to like. So why don't we flip perspectives now, and you guys can actually check out both of these watches up close in the studio. Alright, so I do have both the black and white York in Front Burrard watches in front of me now. They're resting on the nice black leather watch roll that accompanies the watch when you purchase directly from their website. Now I do want to remind you guys that the spec sheet is essentially the same for both watches with respect to the overall movement and case finishing and dimensions. The really only notable difference between these guys is the dial colorway and dial texture, and then the color of a strap. So let's go over the case dimensions, and maybe I'll start off here with the black dial. So you do have a 38mm case diameter here. Flipping the watch to this side, the lug to lug, the wingspan between my thumbs, is a nice compact 44mm. Note the use of drilled lug apertures should you want to accessorize and swap out the strap. Overall case height is just under 12mm. That is to the bottom of this very nicely engraved York in Front case back, and then to the top of this slightly domed and boxed sapphire crystal. Now this sapphire crystal does have anti-reflective treatment on the underside, but in particular the black dial I think just actually has more reflections just due to the matte texture than the white dial, which kind of surprised me, but it is evident to my eye. And then also the lug opening here for the supplied calfskin strap is 20mm. It's actually a very nice strap. It is 20mm at the head, tapering down to about 18 before you get to the signed buckle. And the York in Front buckle is actually very nicely brushed. And I'll talk more about the strap as we get later into the review. Now holding up the white colorway, again, very similar with respect to the overall case dimensions. The strap that comes with it is black as opposed to a brown calfskin. And again, I do find the viewing angles to be slightly better. And in particular, if the overall case shape and form factor of this watch feels similar to you, I do actually think it's quite similar to my Seiko SARB 035. Now one of the owners, Henry, actually noted this during one of our live streams. The dimensions he chose wasn't by mistake. I think being an early Seiko enthusiast, he really enjoyed the proportions of the SARB, and he did want to model a watch that was similar with respect to case dimensions, because it's kind of like a sweet spot if you're going for this type of watch that kind of has a vintage feel design with some updated specs and can also be quite sporty. Now the dial layout for this York in Front watch is extremely clean. I really like the layout. You really only have the York in Front branded logo under the 12 o'clock, and Swiss made just below the 6 o'clock position, and then everything else is applied, and that includes these gorgeous Arabic numerals for each of the hour markers that have a very nice metallic brushed finishing on them. And for both colorways, depending on how you hold this watch at different angles, that brushed finish really plays with a light, and it can be something that really pops out at you, or it could look very muted. I also enjoy the fact that they went with some more vintage inspired syringe styled hands for the hour and minute hand. And the seconds hand reaches all the way out to that printed minute track. And I do like that there's a pop of red on it. And of course you do have an arrowhead there. So getting a very accurate read of time is quite easy to do. And with respect to no light legibility, they did apply some blue BGW9 Swiss Superluminova to the hands and then to some lume plots just below each of the hour markers. Although if I'm being totally honest, you probably won't even recognize the lume plots themselves. The only type of low light legibility you're going to get is with the BGW9 on the hand stack, which should be sufficient just to give you decent orientation. Now coming back to the Swiss made writing below the 6 o'clock Arabic marker, these watches are assembled in Switzerland, and the movement inside here is in fact a Swiss STP 1-11 movement, which is essentially a clone of an ETA 2824-2, but has 26 jewels, very similar to a Sellita SW200. Now according to the spec sheet though, with the STP movements, you are getting a slight increase in power reserve up to 44 hours. It does beat away at 28,800 vibrations per hour. You can manually wind the movement. It does have hacking or stop seconds as well. And in terms of actual accuracy, both of these watches are getting just under -5 seconds per day in my hand. Now operating the movements is actually quite easy to do. This is an oversized 6mm crown. You can actually see the York and front branding on the side of the crown, and it is screwed in, so you do get 100 meters of water resistance on this watch, which I do think makes it very versatile in terms of having a sports watch, but it could also potentially be dressed up a little. Now one of the drawbacks though to the STP movement I find is the winding is extremely gritty on both watches. If you pull this crown to extremity, there is a bit of wobble to the crown as well. And in fact, when manually winding and rethreading it, sometimes you get some rotor wobble, which I'm not too sure that's a typical thing for this movement, but I have heard reports of this in some other Swiss dive watches. Like I owned a vintage Steinhardt diver with the same movement, and I know Zodiac uses a few of these movements, and people can complain about just the audible and gritty feel for winding this movement. Now overall case finishing is going to be the same on both watches, but it's extremely well done, guys. You get some very nice satin finish on the sides of the case here, and then you do get a nice polished bevel that transitions from the side of the case to the hoods of the lugs here. The affixed bezel is done in high polish, and you can see it's kind of stepped down. And even fine touches like having kind of like a truncated angle here at the end of the lugs is kind of nice, and it eliminates any sharp edges. I was also pleasantly surprised by the quality of this calfskin leather that has the York and front embossed on the underside here. It is vintage style. You get some contrast cream stitch near the head of the watch here, and also at the tail portion here. As I did mention, I like this pin buckle. It's actually quite substantial. It's not a very narrow pin buckle, and the overall finishing and attention to detail is very strong. Now on the case back, you have York and front symbol, which I really enjoy the font that they did here. It's deeply engraved, and you also get some other information on the case back as well. So let me give you guys a quick wrist shot of both of these color options, just so you can see how it wears. So here's the white Burrard on my 19 centimeter circumference wrist, and that's 7.5 inches if you're keeping track through the imperial system here. So even though it's smaller than the watch I typically wear with that 38mm case diameter, it still gives you a bit of wrist presence. It's such a clean look, and I really just love the brushed finish on the applied indices. And here's also a quick look at how the black Burrard looks on my wrist with that beautiful brown calfskin vintage leather strap as well. And again, I really just like the York and front buckle. I should mention, if you want to purchase other straps, they do sell them on their website for just around $30 US. And at that price, I really think it's worth the money if you want to accessorize that way. So guys, at the end of the day, I really enjoyed my time with the York and front Burrard. I think it's a very versatile dress/sports watch, and it's also a very good Swiss-made alternative to a Seiko SARB. Now, for future consideration on points for potential improvement, I do wish that they would source some Sellita SW200 movements over the STP movements, but I only say that based on the tactile feel of trying to operate them from the crown. I do know that they discuss this on their webpage, and it just comes down to a matter of sourcing these Swiss movements, because obviously the Swatch group is restricting ETA movements from leaving their group, so sourcing alternatives are a bit harder to do. And I would also like to see a better loom applied to the actual plots on the indices. But other than that, guys, I think you're getting a phenomenal micro brand and Canadian watch for under $500 US. But as always, guys, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section of this video. And if you enjoy this content, please consider subscribing to my YouTube channel. And as always, I'll catch you guys in the next video.